inasmuch. So that's how I happened to go into nursing," she finished, as abruptly as she had begun. Like some wonderful phosphorescent manifestation, her whole shining soul seemed to flare forth suddenly through her plain face. With honest perplexity, Zillah Forsythe looked up from her work. "So that's how you happened to go into nursing?" she quizzed impatiently. Her long straight nose was all puckered tight with interrogation. Her dove-like eyes were fairly dilated with slow dawning astonishment. "You don't mean," she gasped. "You don't mean that just for that?" Incredulously, she jumped to her feet and stood staring blankly into the city girl's strangely illuminated features. "Well, if I were a swell like you," she scoffed, "it would take a heap sight more than a drunken man munching pansies and rum and Bible texts to jolt me out of my limousines and steam yachts and Adirondack bungalows." Quite against all intention, Helen Churchill laughed. She did not often laugh. Just for an instant her eyes and Zillah Forsythe's clashed together in the irremediable antagonism of caste, the plebeian's scornful impatience with the aristocrat, equalled only by the aristocrat's condescending patience with the plebeian. It was no more than right that the aristocrat should recover her self-possession first. "Never mind about your understanding, Zillah dear," she said softly. "Your hair is the most beautiful thing I ever saw in my life." Along Zillah Forsythe's ivory cheek, an incongruous little flush of red began to show. With much more nonchalance than was really necessary, she pointed towards her half-packed trunk. "It wasn't Sunday school I was coming home from when I got my motto," she remarked dryly, with a wink at no one in particular. "And so far as I know," she proceeded with increasing sarcasm, "the man who inspired my noble life was not in any way particularly addicted to the use of alcoholic beverages." As though her collar was suddenly too tight, she rammed her finger down between her stiff white neckband and her soft white throat. "He was a New York doctor," she hastened somewhat airily to explain. "Gee, but he was a swell. And he was spending his summer holiday up in the same Maine town where I was tending soda fountain. And he used to drop into the drug store, nights, after cigars and things. And he used to tell me stories about the drugs and things, sitting up there on the counter, swinging his legs and pointing out this and that, quinine, ipecac, opium, hashish, all the silly patent medicines, every sloppy soothing syrup. Lordy, he knew 'em as though they were people. Where they come from, where they're going to. Yarns about the tropics that would kink the hair along the nape of your neck. Jokes about your own town soup kettle pharmacology that would make you yell for joy. Gee, but the things that man had seen and known. Gee, but the things that man could make you see and know. And he had an automobile," she confided proudly. "It was one of those $1 billion French cars, and I lived just round the corner from the drug store. But we used to ride home by way of New Hampshire." Almost imperceptibly her breath began to quicken. "Gee, those nights," she muttered, "rain or shine, moon or thunder, tearing down those country roads at 40 miles an hour, singing, hollering, whispering. It was him that taught me to do my hair like this, instead of all the cheap rats and pompadours every other kid in town was wearing," she asserted, quite irrelevantly, then stopped with a quick furtive glance of suspicion towards both her listeners and mouthed her way delicately back to the beginning of her sentence again. "It was he that taught me to do my hair like this," she repeated with the faintest possible suggestion of hauteur. For one reason or another, along the exquisitely chaste curve of her cheek a narrow streak of red began to show again. "And he went away very sudden at the last," she finished hurriedly. "It seems he was married all the time." Blandly she turned her wonderful face to the caressing light. "And I hope he goes to hell," she added, perfectly simply. With a little gasp of astonishment, shock, suspicion, distaste, Helen Churchill reached out an immediate conscientious hand to her. "Oh, Zillah," she began. "Oh, poor Zillah, dear. I'm so sorry. I'm so." Absolutely serenely, through a mask of insolence and ice, Zillah Forsythe ignored the proffered hand. "I don't know what particular call you've got to be sorry for me, Helen Churchill," she drawled languidly. "I've got my character, same as you've got yours, and just about 9 times as many good looks. And when it comes to nursing—" Like an alto song pierced suddenly by one shrill treble note, the girl's immobile face sharpened transiently with a single jagged flash of emotion. "And when it comes to nursing? Ha! Helen Churchill, you can lead your class all you want to, with your silk-lined manners and your fuddy-duddy book talk, but when genteel people like you are moping around all ready to fold your patients' hands on their breasts and murmur, 'Thy will be done,' why, that's the time that little yours truly is just beginning to roll up her sleeves and get to work." With real passion, her slender fingers went clutching again at her harsh linen collar. "It isn't you, Helen Churchill," she taunted, "that's ever been to the superintendent on your bended knees and begged for the rabies case and the smallpox. Gee, you like nursing because you think it's pious to like it, but I like it because I like it." From brow to chin, as though fairly stricken with sincerity, her whole bland face furrowed startlingly with crude expressiveness. "The smell of ether," she stammered. "It's like wine to me. The clang of the ambulance gong. I'd rather hear it than fire engines. I'd crawl on my hands and knees 100 miles to watch a major operation. I wish there was a war. I'd give my life to see a cholera epidemic." Abruptly as it came, the passion faded from her face, leaving every feature tranquil again, demure, exaggeratedly innocent. With saccharine sweetness she turned to Ray Malgregor. "Now, little one," she mocked, "tell us the story of your lovely life. Having heard me coyly confess that I went into nursing because I had such a crush on this world, and Helen here brazenly affirmed that she went into nursing because she had such a crush on the world to come, it's up to you now to confide to us just how you happened to take up so noble an endeavor. Have you seen some of the young house doctors' beautiful, smiling faces depicted in the hospital catalogue? Or was it for the sake of the senior surgeon's grim gray mug that you jilted your poor plowboy lover away up in the Annapolis Valley?" "Why, Zillah," gasped the country girl, "why, I think you're perfectly awful. Why, Zillah Forsythe, don't you ever say a thing like that again. You can joke all you want to about the flirty young interns. They're nothing but fellows. But it isn't respectful for you to talk like that about the senior surgeon. He's too terrifying," she finished in an utter panic of consternation. "Oh, now I know it was a senior surgeon that made you jilt your country beau," taunted Zillah Forsythe with soft alto sarcasm. "I didn't either jilt Joe Hazelton!" stormed Ray Malgregor explosively. Backed up against her bureau, eyes flaming, breast heaving, little candy-box cap all tossed askew over her left ear, she stood defying her tormentor. "I didn't either jilt Joe Hazelton!" she reasserted passionately. "It was Joe Hazelton that jilted me, and we had been going together since we were kids, and now he's married the dominie's daughter, and they've got a kid of their own most as old as he and I were when we first began courting each other. And it's all because I insisted on being a trained nurse," she finished shrilly. With an expression of real shock, Helen Churchill peered up from her lowly seat on the floor. "You mean," she asked, a bit breathlessly, "you mean that he didn't want you to be a trained nurse? You mean that he wasn't big enough, wasn't fine enough to appreciate the nobility of the profession?" "Nobility, nothing!" snapped Ray Malgregor. "It was me scrubbing strange men with alcohol that he couldn't stand for, and I don't know as I exactly blame him," she added huskily. "It certainly is a good deal of a liberty when you stop to think about it." Quite incongruously, her big childish blue eyes narrowed suddenly into two dark calculating slits. "It's comic," she mused, "how there isn't a man in the world who would stand letting his wife or daughter or sister have a male nurse. But look at the jobs we girls get sent out on. It's very confusing.